Why are so many people freaking out about an ancient Jewish cow ritual?
The red cow thing is super popular right now.
The red cow.
A Hamas spokesman blamed the Jews for bringing red cows to the Holy Land.
Could a Texas cow start Armageddon in the Middle East?
It all ties back to a passage in the Bible that describes a long-lost purification ritual using the ashes of a mysterious red cow. Some people believe those ashes are the key to rebuilding the ancient Jewish temple and ushering in the end of times.
The whole thing's gonna go. We have to build a temple.
That's a lot of pressure for a simple red cow. So why is this red cow ritual getting people so worked up about the end of the world? In 2022, 5 red cows were shipped from Texas to Israel to prepare for a religious ritual that hasn't been performed in thousands of years. The cows are raised in very strict conditions and closely monitored like they're mysterious organisms from another planet. You're not even allowed to pet them, even though, look how cute they are. I went to see the cows for myself to see what all the fuss was about, and I was kinda shocked by what I learned.
These are the cows.
But none of it makes any sense unless you understand the long-lost ritual that these cows are being prepped for. So let's rewind to ancient Judea, where the temple was the center of society. But visiting it wasn't just a matter of swinging by. Before you could enter, you had to go through a purification ritual that involved being sprinkled with a special kind of water. The key ingredient in this special water was the ashes of a burnt cow. Not just any cow, it had to be perfectly red, inspected down to the individual hairs. And you could only use a female cow that's never had a baby, which is known as a heifer. It also had to be unblemished, so no scars or deformities, and it could never have had a yoke placed around its neck. Basically, it had to be kept pristine like a vintage action figure, still sealed in the box. This perfect heifer was taken to the Mount of Olives, right across from the temple, and slaughtered. They'd burn the cow in a very precise way, along with 3 key ingredients. Then they took the ashes and mixed it with natural spring water, and that's what would be sprinkled on anyone who needed to be purified. But what does it even mean to be purified? In ancient Jewish life, ritual impurity was actually pretty common. Being around dead animals or certain bodily fluids, or people with skin conditions like leprosy, all caused this impurity. One of the main ways to deal with it was to take a special ritual bath. But there was one kind of impurity that wasn't so easy to wash away: contact with a dead human. If you touched a corpse, you became impure. You couldn't even be in the same room as a body. If either happened, the red heifer ritual was the only way back to purity. Now, being impure was the default state for most people most of the time. It didn't really matter at all until you wanted to enter the temple structure. Didn't make you a bad person because you needed to purify yourself before entering the temple, just like it doesn't make you a bad person because you need to wash your hands before you eat. But when ancient Judea was destroyed and the temple along with it, that meant no more red heifer ritual, which technically means we're all currently stuck in that state of spiritual impurity. Since we no longer have a temple, it doesn't really seem like a big deal, so who cares? But here's the thing. In traditional Jewish thought, the temple isn't just part of the past, it's part of the future. Jewish tradition teaches that someday, near the end of time, a Messiah will arrive, a spiritual leader who will usher in an age of peace and prosperity. One of the things the Messiah will supposedly do is rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. And in order to do that, we'll need that special red cow purification water. Now, most Jews think of this as something that'll happen in its own time, someday when the world is ready. Not something we're supposed to actively make happen. It's like that old expression, a watched pot won't bring the Messiah. But not everyone sees it that way. A small number of Jewish groups have taken a more proactive role in trying to prepare for the arrival of the Messiah. Organizations like the Temple Institute have spent years recreating vessels and garments described in the Bible, getting ready for the possibility of a rebuilt temple. And then there's the guys that shipped 5 red cows to Israel to be ready to bring back the red heifer ritual. And I spoke with Rabbi Eitan Kupiecki, who was part of that effort.
The idea of finding the red heifers was to get us one stage closer to building the temple, one stage closer to purity, and bringing the nation as a whole to a higher level. We're trying to just be ready.
The search for the perfect red heifer led them to Texas, because Texas has a lot of cows. And as they started visiting ranches and explaining their story, they were surprised to find so much excitement. See, Texas also has a lot of evangelical Christians, and for some of them, the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem is a precursor to the end of days, when there'll be a period of apocalyptic war after which Jesus will return and defeat the Antichrist. Or so they say. So with the help of some enthusiastic Christian partners, 5 red heifers were brought to Israel. They're being raised in the ancient town of Shiloh, cared for in a very particular way in order to make sure nothing happens that would disqualify them from being eligible for the ritual.
We had cameras on the cows 24/7, making sure that no one would do anything to the cows that we didn't know about.
No one's putting a rope around its neck and dragging it somewhere. You can't use the cows in any way for your own purposes, whether that's tilling your fields or petting their soft little heads. Raising these cows this way requires a lot of effort, and it's not cheap. So why are they even doing it?
Everything here, you have to look at it as a scientific experiment. That right now, we're really just learning how to take care of an animal that can't have any blemish, an animal that has to be kept in a very special and almost basically sacred way. To learn what it means, after over 2,000 years of not having a red heifer, to learn what it means to bring up red heifer cows.
When I visited Shiloh, there were only 4 cows left. When I asked about the 5th, I was surprised by the answer.
One of the 5 cows was already used to research and understand the ritual itself.
That's right, they had slaughtered and burned one of the cows in an actual recreation of the ancient ritual. For Rabbi Kupiecki, this may just be about spiritual preparation and research, but in parts of the Muslim world, it taps into a major source of fear, because the Temple Mount, where Jews believe the temple will be rebuilt when the Messiah arrives, is now occupied by Muslim holy spaces.
Al-Aqsa Mosque belongs to all Muslims.
So when people hear that Jewish groups are taking active steps to bring back the red heifer ritual and prepare for a future temple, that they're even doing practice runs of the ritual, I can understand why that would feel threatening.
I never felt that there is a very close and imminent danger to the entity of Al-Aqsa Mosque as I'm feeling now.
And in the digital age, those fears spread. They escalate, they turn into conspiracy theories. But it raises a fair question. If Jewish tradition includes a long-standing dream to rebuild the temple, why shouldn't Muslims be worried when they see groups actively preparing for it, bringing back ancient rituals that haven't been performed in thousands of years? So to answer that, it helps to have a deeper understanding of the Jewish belief about the coming of the Messiah. And for that, we reached out to an Orthodox rabbi named Yitz Jacobs.
So the Jews do want to establish their temple on the Temple Mount. That is true. And we are told that all of humanity will be assisting us, because this is not just for the Jews, this is for all of humanity. The humanity will be on the same page, and we will all build this together.
In other words, it's something that happens only after the arrival of the Messiah, in a future moment of global peace and spiritual alignment, not conflict.
You can't bring in war or killing or anything gruesome when it comes to the temple, where it has to be pure peace of humanity. And the idea was just to get things ready for when humanity as a whole and the Jewish people as a people are ready to move forward.
Why would we need to take something by force once the Messiah comes and all of humanity is united in a common vision? All nations shall beat their swords into plowshares. Nations will coexist in peace and harmony and will not enact war anymore. It is not a Jewish ascendancy and everyone else, is conquered and subdued. This is independent nations all having a right to self-determination, having a right to coexistence, respect, dignity, and harmonious relations with each other.
So the Jewish dream of rebuilding the temple isn't a battle plan. It's a religious belief that humanity is building towards a better future. But I guess for some folks, that theological nuance is lost within centuries of conflict, mistrust, and misunderstanding. And that's how we end up in a place where a simple little red cow can have real geopolitical consequences. Which is kind of wild, because underneath all the politics and the headlines, we're still talking about an arcane ritual with extremely specific, bizarre details. Many Jewish laws feel logical. Don't murder, don't steal, treat people fairly. But this feels different. This doesn't really make sense. And that puts it into a special category of Jewish law called chok.
Chok is a type of Jewish ritual or law that does not necessarily have a rational basis. It's really beyond something that we can understand.
The red heifer ritual is a classic example of chok, along with circumcision and keeping kosher.
Kosher, why would a pig be anything that we can't eat? What's wrong with a pig? It's, you look at the DNA, you look at the protein structure, and it's the same, right? What's the difference?
So why don't Jews eat pork? And why do we still care about a weird ancient ritual that makes no intuitive sense? No, I don't have an answer. And I guess that's kind of the point. I mean, if nothing in Judaism made sense, we'd be fools for following it. But if everything made perfect sense, there'd be no room for faith. That's why it's a religion, not a science. Though even science acknowledges that reality's way bigger than our current understanding.
If I believe in God, I do not believe that God is limited by my intelligence. There are going to be areas that are beyond my comprehension. It would be incredibly arrogant for me to think that if I don't understand something, it can't exist.
It reminds me of a principle known as Chesterton's fence. The idea that if you come across a fence that crosses a road and you don't see why it's there, you may be tempted to remove it. But it's far wiser not to remove it unless you know why it was put there in the first place. Maybe the fact that we don't understand this ritual is part of why it still gets so much attention, not just from conspiracy theorists, but honestly, kind of normal people, because it taps into something deep within us. Humans are drawn to what we can't explain. That's what religion's all about, grappling with the unknown, following the traditions of our ancestors without assuming we know better than them, or better than God, and daring to believe that things will get better, a future free of war and conflict, a future where all of humanity works together with the awareness that we, and everything around us and beyond us, is one.